Hello, it's your friend Phil, Project Management Trainer and Coach. Welcome to part two of Initiating Process Group in Data Flows. Let's take a look at what exactly happens in the first process of initiating. It's called Develop Project Charter, and the project charter originates from an entity known as the initiator or sponsor. It's also very important to remember that this entity, the initiator or sponsor, usually provides key inputs to developing the project charter. Remember, this is the first process, so this needed information is introduced to the project by the initiator or sponsor. The first one is a statement of work. Now, the term SOW is loosely used in many circles, but in the world of the PMI, when we talk about a statement of work, it is exactly that, a statement of the work that needs to be done on the project. It's a high-level narrative description of what the project is meant to achieve. This statement of work should not be confused with other documents that come further down the pipeline. There is a document that people often confuse with the statement of work, and that document has the word statement in it as well. It's called the project scope statement. So if you're getting ready for the PMP exam, by all means, do not confuse the statement of work with the project scope statement. The project scope statement, which comes much later on in the process, is a well fleshed out description of everything that the project entails. So don't mix that up with this document called the statement of work, which comes from the initiator or sponsor. It's high level, it's brief, it's short, and it's sweet. And from this, your project charter and other documents will be derived. The next input to this process of developing the project charter is a business case. A business case is a popular document in many circles. As the name implies, it makes a case for the project. It could contain a cost benefit analysis showing why the project should be done, why the project should be carried out using a particular solution, using a particular method. It also shows what the team or the company is bound to benefit from the project. So, it's a case, a business case. It makes a case for the project, like in a court of law, the way the lawyer intervenes on behalf of, the client. Well, the business case is meant to make the case for the project so that beyond all reasonable doubt, people reading it, they understand, oh, I see, this is why we are embarking on this. The next document that is an input to developing the project charter is called agreements. Now, the term agreements encompasses things like memorandums of understanding between two parties or more, a letter of intent to do business with a party, for example. It could also contain verbal agreements. So when we talk about agreements, we could be referring to something in an email somewhere. And also, we could be referring to a formal agreement encapsulated in a contract. So, if the project is for an external client, then we could very well be using our contract as one of these agreements and an input to developing the project charter. So, here's the dynamic we've got the agreements, the business case, the statement of work. Those are inputs to developing the project charter. Now we have from the organization two usual suspects that we see throughout the PMBOK guide. These are enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets. These come from within the organization. Now let's talk about what EEFs are at a high level. These are factors that could impact the outcome of the project. They could come from within the organization or without. An example is the availability of resources, regulations, and marketplace conditions, for example. We see this as a recurring theme throughout the PMBOK guide, but the very first place it appears is in Develop Project Charter. If you haven't read EEFs in detail, I would highly suggest that you do it once, and get that down so that when you see it, you know exactly what they're talking about. Another popular EEF that people often get thrown off by is the PMIS, the Project Management Information System. Let's think about it. The availability of that system, or the lack thereof, could impact how your project is managed. It could impact the decision to carry out the project. For example, there are some projects that require an earned value management system, and the criteria is very specific. Now, if you don't have that PMIS, that earned value management system, which we will roll up under the PMIS umbrella, if you don't have that, you can't work on the project. You will not be selected by the government to work on that project. So think about it like that. PMIS, marketplace conditions, regulations, all that stuff, it falls under the EEF umbrella. But if I were you, I would read it thoroughly once. And when you see it again, you know what it means. The other popular input here is OPAs, Organizational Process Assets. There are two big buckets of OPAs. The two big buckets that constitute OPAs are processes and procedures that the firm has spent time putting together and making available to its employees. And that's why it's an asset. Processes and procedures don't come cheap, especially when they're very good processes and procedures that people have put time and energy and effort into. So we look at that as an asset. And the other piece is the corporate knowledge base. So the corporate knowledge base that has records of previous performance of vendors, lessons learned, and so on. Hey, that is also an asset. It's all part of the digital nervous system in an organization. So of course it's an asset. So OPAs and EEFs are a recurring theme. We see them here as an input to developing the project charter. Okay? So those are your inputs to developing the project charter. And of course, what you get out is the project charter. But the problem about this project charter output is it doesn't stop here. A lot of people will get questions wrong on the exam because they don't follow the logical chain of events that happen after the charter is developed. People stop short of going the extra mile to understand, what do I do with the charter? Okay, I know what it is, but the big question is, what do I do with it? The project charter, as I said in the previous video, is authorization for the project manager to apply resources, is authorization for the project or phase, is high-level scope, is a container for that deliverable description for the high-level risks, for the high-level milestone schedule. There is a lot of information that could go in the charter, high-level assumptions, high-level constraints, and so on and so forth. But it's very important that we don't get carried away as we develop the charter. In some firms that I've worked with, I find them making their project charter a plan. Now, it's not a plan. It's not meant to go into detail. It's meant to be at a very high level. In fact, in some firms, a charter could be a couple of pages. It could even be one page. So watch how far you go with your charter. Don't go overboard. In the world of the PMI, they're very particular to say it's high level. And high level means summary level, brief, succinct. So don't go overboard with the charter. Now, let's talk about where the project charter actually goes. The project charter, once it is developed, will become an input to the identify stakeholders process. I talked about that in the previous video. The project charter will also become an input to the develop project management plan process. The project charter will also be an input to, I call them the terrible three. You could call them the fabulous four. Now, I'm talking about time, cost, scope, and risk. So, plan scope management, you're going to see the charter going in there. You're going to see it going into plan schedule management. You're going to see it going into plan cost management and plan risk management. Think about the triple constraint, terrible three, or the fabulous four if you throw in risk. Really depends on how you see it. But in addition to that, the project charter is an input to collect requirements and define scope. So if you can get it down in your head that once this charter is developed, I will use it to flesh out the detail. I'll use it to understand who my stakeholders are. I'll use it as I develop my overall project management plan and for my subsidiary plans of scope and time and cost and also risk. I'm going to use my project charter. So plan scope, plan schedule, plan cost, plan risk, time, cost, scope, risk. You see, if you can keep that in mind, it'll go a long way to helping you as you try to get your arms around this process. Now, why am I spending so much time on this one process? Because it's low hanging fruit for you on your exam. 6.5% potentially could come from what we're looking at. You see? So we've spent a significant amount of time talking about the inputs and the output. The output, there's only one output. We haven't even talked about the tools and techniques yet. Okay, so I want you to digest this information. I want you to get every single question about this right. But try to ask yourself, where am I in the project? Where am I using my charter? Why would I be using my charter? Why would I be using my charter as I plan scope and schedule? Well, of course, we know the project charter has a high-level deliverable description. It has high-level scope. It has high-level milestone schedule, high-level risks. So, of course, when you are fleshing out the detail, when you are deciding how to plan, schedule, and plan cost and plan risk, of course, what about high-level requirements? That could also exist in the charter. So, of course, as you're collecting requirements, you should think about that as an input. Okay, so that concludes part 2 of our study of Initiating 101. In our next video, we'll be talking about the tools and techniques of the Develop Project Charter process. Speak to you then.